Have to imagine.
I feel that it's unfortunate that a lot of African-American males look at these videos and think, oh, this is what a female should be, this is how a female should behave.
I mean, you may be dancing away and think the song has a really good beat, but then sometimes if I sit down and listen to the lyrics, it's kind of makes me feel, just like, is that all I'm here for? You know, is to get you hot or something?
Some females feel that that's the only way to be with a man, is that if they portray themselves that way, then they will have a boyfriend, then they will be loved, then they will be cared for, then somebody will like them and want to be with them.
No, if you got to dance like that and dress like that just to make money, then you shouldn't do it, because there's a lot of other ways, you know, to make money and to show yourself. You know, you don't have to dress like that and, be all, I think it's disgusting.
What I do with my students so that I can educate them in the right way is to find out what they're interested in, I'll ask them, tape your favorite video and bring it to class and let me see what's going on. They will bring videos to class where people are dancing half naked and everybody's got to go to bed with somebody else. And then I critique it and I say to them, these people are just a few years older than you are. They're part of your future. Is this what you want? Is this what's getting ready to happen? Is this the generation that's going to take over? Is it going to be lust and sex and no brains? What is it? And then the kids go to thinking, and they say, well, they're just dancing, and they don't mean anything by it. And I says, you know, you practice at what you're going to be perfect at.
These kids may not know the difference. Yeah, everybody's not a bitch or a hoe, but these kids may not know. And if they're not taught to know, that's how they look at women. And that's how they look at black women, and that's not so.
The encouragement of the debasement of women and race tell me, the encouragement tells me that this is there's a larger plan. When black women are almost generally by the younger people called bitches and whores, that's an indication of our being on our way out. The only way we will disappear, become extinct, is if we kill ourselves.
You know, it's like the word nigger, you know? I mean, that's something that black men ought to be able to understand without very much explanation, and why it is that they don't want white people calling them that. And so, by extension, you know, the same argument goes for women being called across the board bitches and hoes. It's not that complicated.
Our young men, who are 5 of them in our blended family, are taught to respect women. That begins by the respect of their mother. That begins with the respect of their grandmother. And my mother, who is now deceased, they were taught and are taught on an ongoing basis to be careful about what comes across their mouth.
Just make it very
There's nobody holding these young brothers accountable for putting these lyrics and stuff out here. So, and I'm talking about young people who have a problem with it, and I don't think enough people are coming to them with it. If they hear it more from their peers, they probably react differently.
We believe what we see in the media. And so when we see that young girls should be wearing short, hot pants and gyrating all over the screen, that image is devastating because it does not reflect who we really are.
We look at the blurring line between the real world, our news, and our films is frightening when you look at from public policy. Let's just do an air raid on Bosnia. Let's, you know, what did the president goes on television and says, I'm going to demolish some world power. Look at those words and the kind of messages that they send.
It seems like it's almost like the mentality of too fast, too easy, at any cost. You know, it's like I want it now, I want as much as I can get, and I don't care if it's at the cost of a black mother, my brother, the neighbor, a 10-year-old kid, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think one major problem with our youth today is that they could give a damn whether they live or die. And if they don't care about their lives, they sure don't care about your life. And that's one thing that really needs to be corrected.
And I've been fighting now for a year and a half trying to get them to put me in a film that's not New Jack City, that's not Boys in the Hood. And they say, well, who's going to come see that, Halley?
And so I think that in order to portray truthful images about African American life and African American families, we have to go by who's greenlighting projects and who's giving them the okay, who's putting money into them.
My biggest struggle is, who am I talking to? Who is it that I have to convince that this is a good idea, that this should get through, that we need to see this image on television?
Whenever I'm watching television with my daughter, or taking her to see a film or reading a book, I have to rethink everything and re-explain it to her from my point of view, from the point of view that I want her to grow up having.
The images that need to be challenged on TV, all of the negative things that we see. And I keep saying the reason that the negative things are there is because nobody will put the positive things on. Only the positive thinking, only positive images will change this world.
I think that the media has always been unfair in its description and definition of the African American community. I don't have any real expectation that they're going to change anytime soon.
That's the biggest challenge, is trying to get people portrayed in a manner in which they are recognizable to themselves. Because for the most part, for the 20, 30 years that African Americans have had a place in the mainstream media, this has been the battle.
Entering the workforce, young women need to know that the job they begin with will not be the job they end up with. Our entire conception of careers has changed. There are occupations that exist in the 90s that we had no conception of in the 1960s. The Dictionary of Occupational Titles spews out new information daily. And the whole issue, especially of computer literacy and technology, is incredibly important.
When I finish high school, I plan to go to college. I want to be a physical therapist. Right now, I can't afford to go to college full-time, so I'll be working and going to college at night.
Hamilton Holmes was the valedictorian in the class, and I was the third in the class, and they were looking for some young people who had good records, who were strong academically, and we were interested because I wanted to be a journalist. But they suggested that we go to Georgia State, which was the local Georgia system college in Atlanta. And here we were, a couple of 17-year-old seniors, and we looked at the curriculum that they offered, and we said, this isn't good enough for us. We walked out of the building, and Hamilton stood there, and he said, this isn't going to work. He said, I want to go, and he gestured north. And I knew that he was talking about the university, and I said, well, so do I.
Going to Yale as a woman of color was a very alienating, difficult experience. I think all of us who go in, people of color, we think that we can somehow learn what we need to learn about our own culture and about ourselves and about whatever profession we want to go into, and that it'll be an encouraging, enriching, empowering experience. And the reality is that it's really, it can't be.
There is racism and sexism, and so when those issues conflate, you get a situation where you have black students who don't want a white person to teach them African American history, or you have people assuming that a black person can't teach Greek classical literature. Anybody in the ideal world should be able to learn anything they want or teach anything they want.
The fact that you are black, you are a woman, you are probably of a lower economic status, and you have to subject yourself to ideas that people have about you every single day. And I think that by dealing with those ideas, by confronting those ideals head on, you're definitely reclaiming yourself as a black individual.
I do advocate for non-traditional careers for women in the economic area of apprenticeships, trade, and technology.
I had no idea that I was going to be getting into films and making dramatic narratives and all of that. That came as a result, a direct result of the rebellion, the riots in 1966-67 in New York City. And after that period, the state allocated a lot of money to after-school programs workshops to keep the kids off the streets.
I had never met an architect, male, female, black, or white. We knew of no architects. I'd never visited an architectural office, but I decided that I'll go and apply to the School of Architecture at Columbia University, and if I'm accepted, you know, that will keep my parents quiet.
What inspired me to go into such a non-traditional area for an African-American woman, or an African-American in general, was my desire to learn something new, to be able to share it with other African-Americans, as it was a piece that fits into a big puzzle.
I first went to Ebony magazine. Then I went to the Chicago Tribune. And I met writers, older writers, both black and white, that could have encouraged me, but either saw something threatening because I was extremely ambitious, or something amazing because they felt that, and I was often told that they just didn't believe a black woman could write.
I rode a bus all the way from Virginia up to do the amateur show, and I won first prize singing a Bing Crosby song. I never did get my week in the Apollo at that time because I wasn't allowed to stay. I was in New York without my father's knowledge. So I had to get on the bus and go back to Virginia. But I had this feeling inside that I would get back to that stage one day, and I finally did a few years later.
And on my own, you know, as I got a little older and got outside the house and was down at Mr. Collins' juke joint down the corner, I heard Ruth Brown and Laverne Baker, Dinah Washington, and Lil Esther. I remember working 56 nights straight, 2 shows a night, without a night off, and no one asking, how do you feel? You know, so there were some good times and some bad times.
Everybody's gonna have to think again.
There were a lot of naysayers and people who said basically, you know, keep your fingers nimble for that typewriter. In my approach to music in terms of the jazz overtones, I think, again, it goes back to my Aunt Lois. She had the Sarah Vaughan records. She had the Nancy Wilson records. She had the Lena Horne recordings.
There are times where I have wanted to just quit. There are times where I did not work, and she was there for me. And she said, if this is really what you want to do, if you really want to quit, go ahead and do it. But if this is something that your heart desires, then it's only
a business.
It's only a business.
You have to look at it like a business.
And don't take it personally.
Money. Money is my main obstacle. I love to dance. I'm a dancer. And that's all I want to do right now. I'm a good choreographer, and later on in life, I want to do that. But right now, I just want to dance.
African American girls have to think beyond jobs. We really need to think about owning our own organizations, building our own companies. And that's, I feel, the only way that we'll ever be really empowered.
My brothers and I grew up in the business that my parents started in 1964. I guess having that background and that upbringing it's kind of the basis for me doing what I'm doing now and understanding what business means to a family and to a community from having that training and experience when I was younger.
I think one problem that we have is that we want the payoff, but we don't want to work for it. That's a large problem with people my age, at least, and that's why you have a lot of kids out here dealing drugs, because they want that fast money, but they don't want to do what has to be done in order to get there.
The people who do well are not geniuses. They don't have a birthright to doing well. Somebody helped them along the way, and they did the hard work along the way. And I would say to African American women, you've got what it takes. All you need to do is just get in there, any opportunity you get, and exploit that opportunity and use it to just move to where you want to go.
In our first hour, through our celebrity co-hosts and roundtables of young voices, we followed a course from childhood to teens, into young adulthood and the world of work. We looked at the challenges, the trials, and the triumphs. Images and realities, African American women, their lives, thoughts, and hearts, continues. In the next hour, Images and Realities will continue our conversations with black women on work, on health, on the question of beauty, the state of black relationships, and what part imagery plays. AT&T presents Images and Realities, African American Women, co-hosted by Dr. Deborah Prothrow Stith, Halley Barry, Julianne Malveaux, Queen Latifah, and Susan L. Taylor, with special appearances by Dr. Maya Angelou and Esther Rolle. Part 2.
There was a moment when I had these white friends and they were talking about what they were going to do when they grew up, and they were like, I'm going to be a housewife. So I tried that one on for size and came home and said, yeah, I'm going to be a housewife. And my grandmother slapped me and said, fool, you will be working. You will always be working.
My mother, who before she got married was a captain in the military at a time when black women were not in the military that much, and certainly not black women who had risen to the rank of officer.
I think when you understand that when you're a black model, sometimes you do a job and you come in for one day and everybody else is there 7 days. It's not the same.
I think that something else that did influence me into going into architecture is that it seems that improving the quality of life, the environment for people, and especially for my people, that that was important to me.
The architects do the designing, but many people forget about the materials that are specified and needed on major industrial and commercial projects.
What did you do, Regina?
And that is what really spearheaded me to go forward.
I think that I knew that I could start a public relations company because it was very much in my blood. My father started his own business when I was 12 or 13 years old. I remember when he lost his job, and I remember thinking that the family was going to starve to death, but he created an opportunity out of a very dismal situation.
When I started, it was 1967. I migrated from Greenville, South Carolina. I came to Washington to go to beauty school. The guy that owned the salon that I'm working in now, that I own now, asked me, did I want to buy it? A year later, I bought the salon. After that, I bought a salon in Rockville, from Rockville to Herndon, Virginia, from Herndon, Virginia to Scanners Beauty Academy.
I was very lucky, frankly. My father got an award for being one of the pioneer black cartoonists, Detroit Free Press. So his, sent him a letter saying, congratulations, do you know of any other black cartoonists? We're interested in having more blacks on our comic pages to reflect our community. And of course, here I was, his daughter. I sent my work out to them, they liked it, and I was published. And it's a social cartoon, that's the way I describe it. It's black women talking about social issues.
I designed a line for black women or women of color that covers every skin tone in our race, which It's an insult to say that in 1993 that there are no others. They are coming now, of course.
I just turned down a six-figure job, okay, to do talk radio. And so I would have the freedom to go on and pursue activities through my production company so that I can go on and continue and launch my clothing line, so that I can continue with my dreams of being in control. Whatever little bit it is, I want to be in control of that little bit.
When it was time for me to open up a restaurant and to sort of segue out of modeling, and I went to work in a restaurant learning the restaurant business, and people would say to me, hey, you're a model, why are you working in this restaurant? Things are a little tight now, huh? And I'd say, no, I'm going to open up a restaurant.
We are rocket scientists, we are astronauts, we are journalists, we are in international affairs. We have expertise in some areas that you never even heard of.
At least 48 or 49% of newsrooms hire no minorities. When you look at a newspaper, you see that only about 11% of those bylines are by women.
This man came to me and he said, yeah, you've done very well. Your business and your proposal, everything is in order and your product is fine. But there's one thing. I said, excuse me? I said, oh, okay, well, that one thing is a different business than what I'm into. So I guess our business is concluded here.
There are times when I open up the mail, when I get hate mail, that makes me very unhappy. It is enough to make you think about what you're doing, but it's not enough to stop you from doing what you're doing. As a matter of fact, it makes me get ready to rev up more and like, throw those punches and get right back in the ring.
I gave a young brother my card. I went to speak somewhere, and he said, I'm tired of y'all talking about race. You should stop talking about race. I don't believe in discrimination. I gave him my card. I put the date on. I said, call me when you wake up. 2 years later, he couldn't get into a writing seminar, and he called to find out if I could help him. And I said, eventually, it slaps you upside your head. Now, it might slap you softly, but it will slap you.
We are. My challenge is being a woman minister has been very, very exciting, shall we say, because the men in the city where I live always saying what I can't do. They even challenge me with questions and ask me, do you know that you're a woman? Yes, I know that I'm a woman. Do you know that you're black? Well, I've always been black and I've always been a woman.
You know, I may be crazy, but I swear that at those deepest times, I can hear a familiar voice telling me, I'm your mother, I'm your father. Haven't I always been? How did you get here? You didn't do this. So that spiritual side is a very important thing in a business where there is no loyalty, there is no sense of support.
I made good decisions early on, and they have followed me through. I have a feeling that as I get older, those decisions would have been harder to make. I'm just grateful that I made wise ones as a young woman.
So I think there's a lot of education that has to be done about if we don't start businesses, what are the outcomes in coming years? If our rate of business creation is such that we can have 1.5 million black businesses by the year 2010, if simply growing at 7% a year, which isn't very much. So there needs to be the education at some level to do that.
The Republican Party, by way of Reagan and Bush, with their failed public policy, had a great negative impact on the African-American family. The exportation of jobs to third world country and job loss in inner cities caused joblessness and unemployment, which had a great negative impact on our families.
Almost half of our children live in poverty. Half of our women are in marriages, half are not. 44% of all black families are headed by women. So those families automatically are disadvantaged by having only one source of income.
We have to really convince middle-class and more affluent African Americans to begin to petition for our sisters and brothers who are poor and who are locked out of the system. Because when you're fighting for food and shelter, you really can't petition for yourself.
One of the myths of homelessness is that everyone has some type of emotional problem, that they're uneducated, that they're out here because they want to be, that there are people who have advanced degrees, high school diplomas, who are currently employed. Many of the homeless work part-time and full-time and or go to school. Here at our program, we have a number of African American people that donate food. So we are still there. It's just we don't get a lot of the media attention when we're helping our own.
The cycle of being on welfare needs to be broken, because in certain families you have the mother, and then after the mother gets off, there's the daughter, and then that child. It makes you dependent. You're waiting there every month for the money. But welfare must end just like everything else must end. So what you do is you start establishing what kind of future that you want for your child and yourself.
I have to remind people, it was not African Americans or poor people who developed welfare and the way it works. It was white males who thought they knew how to deal with certain problems.
Because we've allowed ourselves to just subsume the stigma of welfare and act as if there's something wrong with people who are on welfare. Well, what's wrong is with a labor market that fails people, that fails to generate enough opportunities for people.
The fight that we had to encounter with the House was, first of all, they're going to send us a letter of first right of purchase in 1990, which was $190,000. We knew that we couldn't get $190,000. So what happened was they tried to buy us out. But we went to different agencies for help and all like that. And then in December of 1999, through the Wish organization, we were able to get the houses.
I have people who say, why would you go on camera and say that you worked as a domestic when you were a star? You know, so what? I had to survive. I had 2 children. I'm just a mother. I was a mother at that time with 2 children who had to be raised and put through school. And however I did it was no more than any other woman would do for children that she loved.
I know motherhood is hard. It's a struggle, especially if you have children and you end up raising them by yourself, which I had 3. I have 6 children, but the first 3, it's 2 sets. And the first 3, it really was hard, because I raised them practically by myself.
We're in better shape now as a people to compete than we've been in the past. We have more access. We are empowered in a way that we haven't been to step up to the table, and we've got to think both of opportunities as we think about some of the pitfalls.
Madam C.J. Walker was the first millionaire that in our entire black race. And what did she do with her money? But she empowered other black women to employment.
I'm a graduate from Madam C.J. Walker, and just reading about her, studying about her, and just looking at her background. And that's one reason I opened a beauty school, behind her story.
There are companies in this country, in this day, in this time, that do not acknowledge the financial and economic contributions of Black America.
African American people still have not quite understood the fact that you must support your own. If you have something that is